You ever sit at a dinner table and feel like the ghost of someone still alive? That was me last Thursday. Same pinewood table, same bland casserole, same voices pretending we were the perfect Canadian family. Except every time I spoke, it was like I was clearing my throat in an empty room. And when I didn't speak, that's when the jokes flew. I'm Amelia Grant, 34, born and raised in Guelph, Ontario. I'm a senior investment strategist with 12 years under my belt, mostly in New York, though I've been back in Canada for a few years now. It's not a flashy job, no TV spots, no YouTube channel. But let's just say when people with more money than time want their future secured, they call me. The thing is, my family doesn't know that. Or maybe they do and just choose not to see it. Dinner that night started like all the others. My mother asked me to please not wear black again, even though I was in navy blue. My younger brother Tyler was already halfway through a story about this genius marketing plan at his startup that sounded suspiciously like a TikTok trend from 2021. My father chuckled, adding how proud he was. I nodded politely, sipping water. Still invisible. Amelia, my mom finally said you still doing that thing with spreadsheets or something. I smiled. It's called portfolio strategy. I specialize in risk-weighted. Oh well, she cut in already, turning toward Tyler. Anyway, Tyler, tell us more about that pitch deck you're preparing. Your dad said it was brilliant. I chewed slowly. Chicken. Slightly dry. Not worth dying over, but close. I'd flown in from Toronto just for this. Took the day off. They knew that. But it didn't matter. It never had. The Grant family motto, spoken or not, was simple: Tyler is the sun, and we all orbit his potential. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not bitter. Okay, maybe a little, but I've worked through most of it. Years of therapy will do that. I no longer need their approval like I once did, but sometimes it still stings, especially when you realize they don't just ignore your achievements. They actively downplay them like it makes them uncomfortable that you're doing well without needing them. So my father said, suddenly leaning back in his chair next Friday fancy dinner. My boss is coming in from Toronto. Big guy, runs the national division now, wants to meet the family. Oh my God, my mom beamed. Tyler, you need to wear that navy blazer. You'll look like you're already running your own firm. Then, like an afterthought, you should come to Amelia. Complete the picture. I raised an eyebrow. The picture? Come on, don't be dramatic, Dad said, waving me off. It's just dinner. Right, just dinner. I looked around the table. Tyler scrolling on his phone, Mom dabbing her lips with a napkin, not because she needed to, but because she liked the way it looked. Dad pouring himself another glass of wine, like we were all part of a Curate magazine, spread called Functional Family, in neutral tones. They just told me once again that I didn't matter, and I was going to show up anyway, not because they deserved it, but because I was curious. I didn't confirm my attendance to the dinner that week. Didn't say yes, didn't say no. Just let the group text sit there unread, but clearly marked seen. A ghost move, really. Fitting. Tyler followed up once with a thumbs up emoji. Mom sent a just checking in sweetie, which I interpreted as, we need you to fill the empty chair for optics. Dad didn't text. He never did. His version of communication was silence, layered with mild disappointment. I booked a hair appointment instead. Subtle waves of blowout. Simple but intentional. Not that anyone in my family would notice, but someone else might. Then I went shopping for a new outfit. Not a power suit, not a party dress. A deep emerald green wrap blouse, sharp pleated slacks and low black heels. Jewelry minimalist. Makeup clean. Every detail calibrated to say I am successful, and I didn't need your help to get here. The dinner was at Vignette, one of the city's more upscale restaurants. White linen tablecloths, waiters who whispered, and wine glasses that looked like they'd been hand-blown by angels with Michelin stars. The kind of place where menus don't have prices, and water has adjectives. We arrived in a staggered mess. Tyler and Mom first greeting the host like they came here weekly. Dad and I pulled up in separate cars same time. He offered a stiff nod as I stepped out of my Uber, as if greeting a colleague at a corporate retreat. I'm glad you came, he said, eyes forward. I'm surprised I was invited, I replied, tone light. He didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Maybe that was something. We were seated at a round table near the private alcove at the back. Dad had clearly pulled strings. The kind of place you take clients to close. The kind of table you reserve when you want to impress. Boss is running a few minutes behind, Dad said, scanning the room. So Tyler, Mom chirped. Remember to mention your pitch. The one about microscaling what was it again? Decentralized loyalty solutions, Tyler said, beaming, which to the untrained ear sounded like nothing, but to my family, genius. I folded my napkin and laid it on my lap. Just smile. Just sit through it. The waiter brought wine. Small talk flowed mostly about real estate gas prices and how hard it is to find good help these days. Every few sentences someone would glance at the entrance waiting. Then he walked in. 6'2", salt and pepper hair, dark tailored suit eyes, like someone who'd read your resume before you ever applied. My father stood nearly knocking over his water glass. Alan over here. Alan gave a warm smile and approached with an effortless grace that made my dad seem almost amateur by comparison. They shook hands like old war buddies. Tyler stood too eagerly offering his hand. Alan shook it distractedly, already glancing at me. And then it happened. He paused, tilted his head, and said, Amelia Grant. The whole table froze. I blinked. Yes. His eyes lit up. Of course you are. Ma'am, it's a pleasure. He extended his hand, respectful, measured, deliberate. Not hello, nice to meet you. No, this was something else. The kind of handshake you give to someone who matters, someone you admire. My mother's wine glass clinked against her plate. You two know each other? My father asked, voice thin. Alan smiled. We haven't met directly, but I've followed Ms. Grant's work for years. You manage the Weston Sloan Infrastructure Fund, correct? I nodded slowly. Exceptional strategy. The move you pulled in Q4, rebalancing into energy mid-cycle, brilliant. Saved our subsidiary millions. Tyler opened his mouth, then shut it. I smiled. Thank you. I didn't know it had reached that far. Oh, it has, Alan said. I quote your quarterly reports to my own team. Hell, we even revised some of our asset models based on your projections. When Richard said he had a daughter in finance, I didn't expect you. Silence. The kind that doesn't hum, doesn't buzz, just spreads out and settles heavy and real. Dad cleared his throat. Well, Emilia's always had a head for numbers. Alan looked at him with amused disbelief, then back at me. You're the reason I accepted this dinner, to be honest. Thought I'd finally get to shake your hand. That's when I laughed, softly. Just a breath of irony and clarity. I laughed and took a sip of wine. And for the first time in 34 years, the table had no comeback. For a few seconds after Alan's comment, the table seemed to forget how to function. Tyler stared into his glass like it had just told him he'd peaked. My mom blinked in rapid succession, her lips moving soundlessly as if trying to summon a compliment that wouldn't sound like an apology. My dad, well, his face was that perfect shade of pink men get when they realize their authority is slipping through their fingers, but they can't shout in a restaurant with cloth napkins. Alan took his seat directly beside me, shaking off his coat with a practiced shrug. The waiter returned to pour his wine, but even that quiet stream of Cabernet couldn't drown out the clumsy silence hanging over the table. So Alan sat dabbing at the corner of his mouth with a napkin. What brings you to Guelph, Miss Grant? I'd assumed you were still working out of Toronto or New York. Oh, I'm still based in Toronto, I said lightly. Just here for a quick family check-in. A lucky coincidence, he said with a smile. My mom leaned forward, eyes still darting. You said you follow Amelia's reports. Alan nodded. Regularly. We have a running internal thread in our division called WWED. What would Amelia? Do a bit of a joke, but honestly, it's kept us in the black more than once. I nearly choked on my water. You're joking, I said. Not even a little, he replied. Your commentary during the 2020 market rebound was miles ahead of our own analysis. I've been hoping we'd cross paths. I could feel the table's tension press against me like heat. Tyler looked like he was doing long division in his head, desperately searching for a way to loop this back to himself. "That's really something my dad finally said, voice stiff. "You never mentioned all this, Amelia." I shrugged. "Didn't think you'd be interested. Last time I tried to explain what I do, you asked if I still played with charts." Alan chuckled. "Well, Richard, for what it's worth, your daughter is a bit of a giant in the investment world, at least in certain circles. A mentor to quite a few young analysts on my team, actually." Mom clutched her purse like it had suddenly become a flotation device. "Tyler's in business too," she added weakly. "He's working on a decentralized loyalty solution." Tyler cut in, straightening. "We're hoping to disrupt the reward space." Alan turned to him with polite curiosity. "Interesting. What's your projected burn rate through Series A?" Tyler blinked. We're pre-seed. Still refining." Alan offered a neutral nod and turned back to me. "Do you do any mentorship work?" "Occasionally," I said, in catching Tyler's visible flinch in the corner of my eye. "Most of it's low-key. I try to avoid the spotlight." "Well," Alan said, raising his glass, "maybe it's time to step into it." We clinked glasses gently. The food arrived, but the flavor had long left the table. My mother barely touched her plate. Tyler took a single bite and put down his fork. My father tried to shift the conversation back to quarterly goals and team leadership, but Alan, charming, effortless, Alan kept coming back to me. He asked about my recent trip to Oslo, about emerging markets, even about my opinion on cryptocurrency trends, which I normally avoid like an uncle's political rant at Thanksgiving. But with Alan, it felt like talking shop with a peer. He listened, engaged, understood. At one point, he even jotted down something I said on his phone. Tyler saw it. I saw Tyler see it. By dessert, the balance of power had shifted so drastically it felt like the floor had tilted under our feet. As the waiter placed espresso in front of us, Alan leaned toward me one last time. "If you're ever open to it, I'd love to have you speak to our senior cohort," he said. "We fly in guest advisors every quarter. Your insights would be a huge asset." "I'd be honored," I said, cool and steady. "Just send me the details." Across the table, my father's jaw had gone rigid. "Oh, and Richard," Allen added as an afterthought, "you didn't tell me you raised a financial powerhouse." My dad gave a strained smile. "She's always been independent," which in our house used to mean difficult. Now it meant untouchable. And I wasn't about to correct him. The dinner ended like a stage play, with the lights dimming, everyone unsure whether to clap or just get up and leave. My father offered to cover the bill. Alan declined graciously, saying the company would take care of it. That somehow made it worse. As we all stood to leave, Alan pulled out his phone and said, "Amelia, let me get your card, or LinkedIn, whichever you prefer." I handed him my business card with quiet confidence. A clean black matte finish, raised silver ink. Nothing flashy, just intentional. The kind of card you don't throw out. "Thanks again for the conversation," he said. "It was the highlight of my trip." We shook hands a second time. Then he turned to my dad. "Richard, I'll be in touch next week, but you'll forgive me if I loop in your daughter on that infrastructure proposal I mentioned. She's clearly the sharper strategist." My father chuckled through clenched teeth. "Of course. Always room for collaboration." Alan gave a final smile, nodded to the rest of the table, and disappeared into the coat room. There was a moment of breathless, icy silence. Then my mom exhaled, like she'd been holding her stomach in for 2 hours straight. "Well," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her lapel that went, "well," I almost laughed, almost. Outside the restaurant, the night air was sharp with early spring cold. Cars rolled past in quiet bursts of wind. The valet handed my father his keys with a nod, and he gestured for Tyler and Mom to get in. Then he turned to me. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked flatly. "Tell you what I said, playing dumb. That your name carries weight in my world. That people like Alan know who you are." I met his eyes. Would it have mattered? He didn't answer, just looked away. Tyler stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed, sulking like a toddler who just learned his sister was actually Batman. "Do you enjoy making us feel stupid?" he snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped trying to make you see me." Mom's door opened. She leaned out. Can we talk later, maybe tomorrow? I gave a small smile. I'll be busy. I walked toward my Uber without another word. As I rode back to my Hotel Guelph, passing quietly outside the window, I felt a strange blend of satisfaction and sadness. There was no shouting match, no dramatic exit, just me leaving as I'd arrived alone, but not diminished. Not this time. Back at the hotel, I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a glass of the overpriced minibar wine, and opened my laptop. I had 24 new LinkedIn notifications, 4 messages from junior analysts referencing Alan's division, 1 from Alan himself. A pleasure meeting you tonight. Let's set up a call next week. We'd love to bring you in as a guest advisor if your schedule allows. I typed a quick professional response, then sat back letting the moment settle around me. For years, I let my family's dismissiveness shape how I showed up around them, smaller, quieter, more agreeable. It was easier that way, until suddenly it wasn't. Until someone else at the table saw me and called me ma'am. It was wild, really, how a single moment of recognition from the right person could crack years of silence wide open. The next morning, I checked out early, catching the 8:10 train back to Toronto. I left no note, no thank you text, nothing for them to misinterpret as an invitation. As the train pulled out, I stared out the window and thought about the next time we'd sit at a table together, if ever. A week passed before I heard anything from them. I wasn't waiting. I had back-to-back client calls, reviewed 2 acquisition portfolios, and had lunch with a journalist from the Globe and Mail who wanted insight into the post-pandemic investor mindset. But still somewhere between my 3rd espresso and the 5th hope, this finds you well email. I wondered if they'd say something. It came on a Thursday evening in the form of a group text from my mom. We should talk, maybe this weekend, just us. No Alan. The no Alan part made me smirk, as if he were the problem, as if everything hadn't already been broken long before that dinner. I didn't reply. The next message came from Tyler. You embarrassed us. I stared at it for a long time, then typed 3 words. I was polite. No reply. By the following week, Alan and I had our first official Zoom call. His assistant scheduled it for 10 a.m., and I made sure I wore the same green blouse from the dinner. A small nod to the moment that had finally shifted the narrative. Still the sharpest person in the room, Alan said as we logged on. We talked strategy, advisory fees, scheduling. He offered a quarterly guest advisor position. Light work, high pay, remote. It wasn't just a job, it was a signal. A message to every part of my life that had once underestimated me. You are not small anymore. After the call, I forwarded the signed NDA and proposal doc to my personal lawyer, then closed my laptop and just sat. In the silence of my apartment, with the soft hum of the city outside, I finally allowed myself to feel it the shift. Not just in how others saw me, but how I saw myself in relation to them. I didn't need to earn respect anymore. I had it. That weekend, I got another message, this time from my dad. A full email, not a text. Amelia, I think we may have misjudged you. You've clearly built something real, and it deserves acknowledgement. Perhaps we didn't understand it before, but we do now. I'd like to invite you to lunch next weekend. Just you and me. No pressure. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever seen from him. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I didn't owe him the emotional labor of making him feel okay about finally noticing me. They weren't used to silence from me. I was the peacekeeper, the steady one, the buffer. Now the quiet had become a boundary. A few days later, I ran into Tyler downtown. Pure coincidence. He was crossing the street with a takeout bag and nearly walked into me. We both froze. He gave a short laugh. Well, look at that. Hey, I said evenly. Still too good for us. I tilted my head, still trying to drag me back down. He flinched. Just a second, but I saw it. You could have helped me, he said quieter. At the dinner. Thrown me a lifeline or something. You wanted to be the center of attention, I replied. You just didn't expect I'd be invited to the table, too. He looked away. You're not the enemy, Tyler, I added. But I'm not your background character either. Then I turned and walked away. No scene, no dramatic goodbye, just a woman with somewhere better to be. Back home that evening, I poured myself a drink and flipped through my notebook notes for a webinar I'd been invited to co-host with one of Alan's partners. Topic: Owning your voice in rooms that ignore you. Funny how timing works. As I scribbled an outline, I thought about that night at the restaurant, about the look on my father's face, about Alan calling me ma'am, and I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to. The webinar went live 3 weeks later. I sat in my condo framed by warm lighting and a backdrop of curated simplicity bookshelves, a modest plant, the glow of confidence that comes from finally being seen. Over 3,000 people logged in live. One of the moderators messaged me mid-session, chats exploding. "You're striking a nerve." I spoke about finance, sure. Market psychology asset classes, the usual alphabet soup of investment terms, but I wrapped it in story. I spoke about being overlooked in meetings, talked over at family dinners, underestimated in rooms where I had every right to be. And I told them this: silence isn't always submission. Sometimes it's power waiting to be claimed. The comments lit up. I didn't mention my family by name. I didn't need to. That evening, my inbox filled with messages, strangers, colleagues, people who said things like, "Your story is mine." I sent the replay to my mom. She needed to hear it. I finally confronted my boss, and one quietly tucked in at the bottom. From Ruth Grant's subject, I watched it. 2 message: "You made me cry. I'm proud of you. I just wish I said that earlier. Mom." I read it 3 times. That was the first "I'm proud of you" I'd received from her. And it wasn't said in a room. It was sent, typed, thought over, possibly rewritten, maybe even nervously. But it was there. I didn't reply, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because some things need to settle first. A few days later, Alan called. "Quick update," he said. "We've greenlit a mentorship series. They want you to lead it." I blinked. Me. Yes, you. There's a budget, a speaking fee, and a waiting list already. I don't even have a public brand. You don't need one. You've got authority. I paused, letting it sink in. "All right," I said, "let's do it." "Also," he added with a laugh, "your dad's trying to book me for lunch. Should I?" "You should cancel." "Got it," he said, still chuckling. Figured. The mentorship series launched that spring. Every session sold out. It was strange at first, people treating me like a thought leader when just months before I was the invisible sibling at a beige table in Guelph. But I grew into it. And somewhere between the second and third session, I realized something else. I didn't need them to change. I had changed. Their smallness no longer shrunk me. Their silence no longer defined me. Their opinions no longer occupied prime real estate in my mind. They were simply people I used to let hurt me. One afternoon, after the 3rd mentorship session, I received a handwritten letter. Rare these days. The envelope was unmarked, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My father's. It read, "Amelia, you've proven yourself. We see it now. I see it. I just don't know how to bridge the distance anymore. You were always meant for more. I just didn't know how to say that without losing the version of family I was holding on to. I hope someday we can start again. Dad." I read it slowly. Then I folded it, once placed it in my drawer, and left it there unanswered. Not because I hated him, but because I loved myself more. That night, I sat on my balcony sipping tea, letting the cool breeze tangle through my hair. The city hummed below like a lullaby I didn't know I needed. Lights blinked in distant windows. Somewhere, someone else was reclaiming their worth. I liked to imagine that. Maybe Tyler would figure himself out. Maybe my parents would learn what love looks like when it doesn't come with conditions. Maybe. But none of that was mine to fix anymore. I had my own table now, and everyone at it knew exactly who I was. Spring melted into summer like honey into warm tea, and with it came a gentler pace to life. The mentorship series turned into a podcast by Request the Quiet Table, a title that made me smile every time I said it out loud. Episode 1 opened with a soft piano intro and my voice saying, "If they won't give you a seat, build your own table." and then leave it open for those still trying to find theirs. It climbed to the top 100 on Canadian business podcasts in less than 2 weeks. I kept the tone calm, personal, never preachy. I didn't want to sound like someone who had it all figured out. I wanted to sound like someone who had simply stopped pretending. One Friday evening, I received a call from my uncle, the only one who'd ever treated me like a full person growing up. "I've been listening to your podcast," he said. "Your mom doesn't talk about it, but I know she's listening too." I stayed quiet. He cleared his throat. "She's not the same since the dinner. Since everything. She's softer, quieter." "I'm not angry anymore," I said truthfully, "but I'm also not walking backward." "You shouldn't," he said, "but you should know you changed something." It wasn't a call for reconciliation. It was a quiet relay of facts delivered without expectation. That was enough. 1 week later, I was invited to keynote a financial ethics summit in Montreal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Someone who'd spent most of her life tiptoeing around familial disrespect, now being asked to speak on integrity and courage. I told the story of a woman who was underestimated, who was used as decoration at family events, and talked over at dinner tables. I never named names. I didn't need to. I ended the speech with a line I hadn't planned. We think of revenge as fire, but sometimes the most powerful form of justice is peace. Not the kind they give you, but the kind you claim. The applause was quiet at first, then filled the room like water rising in a glass. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "I cut off my parents last year," she whispered. "And this made me feel like I'm not wrong." "You're not," I said gently. "You're just building your own table." Back in Toronto, my building's doorman handed me a small package, no return address. Inside was a keychain, a silver miniature chair. Attached to it, a card. "To the only person at that table who brought her own seat. A quiet admirer." I laughed soft and long. Somewhere someone had understood everything. And then one evening, I found myself standing outside my parents' home. It wasn't planned. I had driven past after a client meeting nearby, and something pulled me in. The porch looked the same: wicker chair, pale light, the smell of lilacs. I didn't knock. I stood on the sidewalk, let the moment breathe. The living room window glowed. Shadows moved inside 2 figures. My parents probably watching TV. For once, I didn't feel like the child on the outside looking in. I felt like someone who had already been in, seen it all, and chosen the air out here instead. I turned and walked back to my car. It was not sadness. It was closure. That night, I journaled something I hadn't dared write before. They don't have to be villains for me to choose myself. They just have to be who they are. And I just have to be free. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, I hosted a quiet gathering at my place. Nothing extravagant, just 5 women. I'd mentored a few close friends from the industry, and one of my podcast listeners who had flown in from Winnipeg. We sat in a circle on my terrace, fairy lights strung above, soft jazz humming through the speakers, the air warm with late summer. There was wine, laughter, stories that started with, "You won't believe what my family did when I," and ended with knowing nods, shared sighs, and that rarest of comforts, being understood. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about reclamation, boundaries, healing, and freedom. One of the women asked me, "Do you ever think about going back, reconnecting? I looked at her and smiled, not sad, not bitter, just honest. "I think about the person I was before they called me nothing I said, and I think she deserves the peace I have now." I still get updates through the family grapevine. Tyler's business is apparently struggling. He's pivoted again, this time into something blockchain adjacent. My parents have downsized. My mother joined a church book club. My father plays golf and no longer asks about my career when speaking to his colleagues. He simply says, "My daughter works in finance." No qualifiers, no apologies. I suppose that's something. But I haven't been back. I haven't sat at their table, and I don't plan to. Not because I'm punishing them, but because I've finally built a life where I don't need to beg for space in anyone's narrative. I've written my own. The podcast is still going strong. The guest advisor role expanded into a board seat. I mentor, quietly speak occasionally, and walk freely. Sometimes I see women like me in airports, cafes, and boardrooms overlooked, underestimated. I don't always say anything, but when I do, it's usually something simple. They don't see you now. That's okay. They will. And when I walk into rooms, be it conferences, meetings, or even just a dinner out, I no longer shrink. Because now I know they said I was nothing, but someone who mattered called me ma'am, and then I remembered who I was all along. To everyone listening, if you've ever been dismissed, talked over, belittled, at your own table, I want you to know this. You are not small. You are not invisible. You are not selfish for choosing peace over proximity. Sometimes the loudest revolution is the one where you simply stop explaining. So build your own table, bring your own seat, and make sure you leave one open, just in case someone else like you finally finds their way home. You are not alone. Thank you for listening. I'm Amelia Grant, and I see you.